Welcome, visitor, to this tour of the Northern Australian Railway. It's hard to imagine the social and industrial change ushered in by the 19th century golden era of steam. Trains replaced uncomfortable, expensive, and time-consuming trips by camel, horse, and bullock wagons, stagecoach, ship. Roads in the early days were impassable. Railways allowed people to travel to work. In countries such as Canada and the US, railway lines ran from coast to coast, making isolated towns, fostered settlement, and were regarded as instruments of nation building. In Australia, however, railway mania was parochial and uncoordinated. Rather than linking isolated towns and seaboards, railway lines were built to link ports with local outback, not city with city. Each colony jealously developed autonomous economies and railway systems with different gauges and little thought for transcontinental travel. It was to be another 100 years before gauges on the national railway system were standardized. Pastoralism is one of the great industries of the Northern Territory. It's suddenly been an important part of the territory's identity. The period between the 1860s to 1895 was a time of large-scale pastoral settlement and development in the Northern Territory. Immense runs were taken up and large sums of money invested, and hundreds and thousands of sheep, cattle, and horses were overlanded to stock the new properties. The 19th century was Australia's pioneering era, with gold seekers, adventurers, and pastoralists seeking new land and fortunes. In South Australia, farmers moved north across Goyder's drought line in an attempt to find arable land, good seasons giving them confidence in the quaint belief that rain follows the plough. Railways were needed to bring the wheat and mining produce to Port Augusta and Adelaide, but these early lines were seen as the start of a transcontinental line that would foster the development of mining, tropical agriculture, and trade with Asia. With the commencement of the Southern Line in 1878, reaching towards Unadilla in 1891, the newspapers of the time wrote, "If it only went to Port Darwin, it would be worth constructing, but in going there, it went to Java, India, Siam, and China, and also shortened the communications with Europe and America. The line would ramify eventually to Queensland and New South Wales, and who could tell the full benefits which would accrue from connecting all these colonies with the iron band of a railway." In 1855, the first New South Wales Railway Governor spoke at the time, when the whole country would be covered with a network of railways to help develop the resources of the country and increase the value of the vast territory now lying waste. By 1861, there were 390 kilometers of line in Australia. By 1871, there were 1,657 kilometers, and by 1881 there were 6,456 kilometers in the 6 colonies. Port Darwin is one of the finest harbours in Australia. So sure as to tomorrow follows today, this magnificent harbour will be the Singapore of Australia, provided, of course, certain works are undertaken and restrictions removed. The work I refer principally to is the transcontinental line, an undertaking which is bound to be carried out in time and which will connect the two splendid ports of Augusta and Darwin. As these comments from some collector of customs, Alfred Searchy, show, the vision of a railway linking with Darwin's deep natural port is hardly new. Searchy's comments were made in 1909, reflecting on his time in Darwin in the 1890s. The Adelaide-Darwin Railway. The first suggestion of a transcontinental railway between Adelaide and the tropical north came from a Melbourne businessman, J. Robertson, in 1858. The South Australian government showed no interest at the time, but private interest led to the formation of the Great Northern Railway Company of South Australia in 1869. It was incorporated with a capital of £1 million to enter into an agreement or agreements with the government of South Australia for the construction of the railway from Port Augusta. Nothing came of this or later proposals, but in 1878, South Australia finally began to build its 3 feet 6 inch gauge Great Northern Railway. Starting in Port Augusta, it was expected to reach Darwin within a short time. It finally reached Marie in 1883 and was extended to reach Unadilla in 1891. I became interested in the Northern Australian Railway when I was in Darwin 2007. I explored many of the cycle paths which followed the old Pine Creek Railway route. In particular, the route from Darwin to Palmerston follows 20 kilometers over the old track and bridges. Some of the old track has been preserved, and certainly as you ride the cycle path, you pass over the old concrete embankments. Along the cycle path one passes lots of interpretive signs about the raft-based siding. During the Second World War, a spur line was run from the Northern Australian Railway to the new raft base, and the war demands led to great expansion in the use of the railway. The Palmerston and Pine Creek line. In 1883, the John Cox Bray Government introduced the Palmerston and Pine Creek Railway Bill. The line reached Pine Creek in 1888, so officially opened 30th of September 1889. Some 3,000 Chinese laborers worked on this part of the line. Many different proposals have been made since to join Pine Creek with Unadilla. When the Commonwealth government took control in 1926, it extended the line from Unadilla to Alice Springs and from Pine Creek to Birdum. Both places were reached during 1929. During the Second World War, Larrimah, 9 kilometers north of Birdum, became the effective railhead. The 1,000 or so kilometers between Birdum and Alice Springs were never completed. Originally the terminus of the railway, the line to nowhere, Larrimah is now just another stopover point on the Stuart Highway, with an outback hotel, the Larrimah Hotel, which was actually the pub at Birdum until it was moved to Larrimah in 1952. The line was closed in 1976. There are many old remains at Pine Creek of the original Pine Creek Railway, including some of the line and a reconditioned locomotive shown here. Now let's move 100 kilometers south from Pine Creek to Catherine. I'm with my friend Jamie and we're cycling on the bank of the Catherine River, and we pass the old Emagellan town site, the original start to Catherine. Now look at the Catherine Bridge. Nearly 100,000 pound bridge was built across the Catherine River, largely to ease unemployment. The 213 metre bridge was based on a design of a bridge in Penrith, New South Wales. It consisted of 7 100-foot spans and was supported by reinforced concrete piers, founded on cast iron cylinders filled with concrete and resting on solid bedrock. Stone came from a new quarry at Edith River. It took a year to build and was used during floods for all traffic until a new high-level bridge was built in 1976. The Northern Line was built primarily to take freight. After opening on the 30th of September 1888, it rarely ran at a profit. The gold rush died, cattle were not proving successful, and were too far from the line. The wet season caused derailments as embankments washed away. Termites ate the wooden sleepers, and the territory's population was in decline. By 1891, South Australia had spent $10 million on railways. The colony's bonded debt was £21.5 million, £2 million of which was incurred in the territory, and the completion of the Northern Line coincided with growing disillusionment with its northern colony. In 1911, the Commonwealth took over the administration of the territory. The Northern Railway was eventually to close in 1976. Although the line never ran at a profit, it had a major impact on the growth and settlement of the Northern Territory. Thank you, visitor, for staying with me on this quick overview of the Northern Australian Railway line.